In our parliament, only 10% are women.
In my country, girls are sometimes married off before the age of 10.
Where I live, men and women don't have same opportunities for parental leave.
In my country, girls don't have the same educational opportunities as boys.
Where I live, women and men are still getting paid differently for doing the same jobs.
Women and girls make up 50% of society, and yet they own less than 20% of the world's land resources.
I want my daughter to have the same opportunities as her brother, and I don't want her to be afraid of anything.
Our feminist foreign policy has one aim: to make life better for women and for everyone. Everyone should have the same opportunities in life, be able to follow their dreams, realize their potential, participate in society and shape their own future. We need to ask, where are the women? We need to recognize the role of women in peace and in ending war. And we need to stand up to those who want to decide over women's bodies, to those who think women are a threat.
Because equality benefits everyone.
When women are free to work, educate themselves, and be free from violence.
Because societies that are healthier,
Safer,
and more prosperous.
For everyone.
Selamat siang, Bapak Ibu sekalian. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Zoom webinar this afternoon. Allow me, from the virtual event organizer, to quickly introduce you on how to use the interpretation feature for this Zoom webinar. Next, please. We would like to ask you to always mute your microphone when you are not speaking, but most importantly, for those needing the interpretation feature, to use and to download and to use the latest version of the Zoom application. Jadi untuk Bapak Ibu sekalian yang akan menggunakan fitur penerjemahan, mohon sudah mengunduh dan menggunakan Zoom versi terkini. Berikutnya. How to use the interpretation feature on this computer. If you are logging in using computer or PC, on the bottom right of your screen, there will be a globe icon says interpretation. Please select the language that you wish to listen, and there will be a simultaneous interpretation throughout the webinar. And we kindly advise you to not mute the original audio. Bapak Ibu sekalian yang membutuhkan penerjemahan di sepanjang webinar, maka bila menggunakan komputer atau laptop, sudah ada di kanan bawah layar icon bola dunia. Mohon diklik dan dipilih bahasa yang ingin didengarkan. Akan ada penerjemahan secara simultan di sepanjang webinar siang hari ini. Dan kami menyarankan Bapak Ibu tidak perlu memute original audio. Selanjutnya, if you are logging in using a mobile phone, the simultaneous interpretation is also available on your mobile phone Zoom apps. On the bottom right of your screen, there's 3 dots. Please click and select language interpretation. Select the language that you wish to listen. And lastly, click done to activate the service. Bila Bapak Ibu siang hari ini menggunakan handphone dalam mengakses pertemuan kita, maka juga ada penerjemahan secara simultan. Di kanan bawah layar ada 3 titik, mohon diklik dan dipilih language interpretation dan dipilih bahasa yang ingin didengarkan. Terakhir, klik done untuk mengaktifasi layanan. Terakhir, Bapak Ibu, ada sedikit disclaimer. Please note that to ensure the smooth running of today's meeting, that host and co-host reserve the right to force mute the audio or to turn off the videos of the panelists who are not speaking that may be unintentionally causing disruption to the meeting. This is to ensure that the audio of the speaker and the interpreter remains clear at all time. We thank you for your cooperation in this matter. Have a productive webinar. Selamat berkegiatan. We would like to call our distinguished moderator for this afternoon, Ibu Julia Surya Kusuma.
Good afternoon to everyone in Indonesia. Good morning to those in Sweden and Europe, and greetings to everyone from other parts of the globe. My name is Julia Surya Kusuma. I will be the moderator for this webinar, which has a very catchy and enticing title, Her Rights, Money, Power, Autonomy, followed by an explanatory subtitle, How Can Gender Equality in the Workplace contribute to a more sustainable economic recovery post-COVID, which brings us back to reality. This webinar is an initiative of the Swedish Embassy in Jakarta in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has created a global recession and which has affected women the most, especially poor women. If there were inequalities before, the pandemic is deepening them. Despite this fact, women are also the key to sustainable economic recovery post-COVID, as in fact the notion of gender equality as smart economics is a relatively well-known one. It has been the rationale behind policies and programs implemented mainly in low-income and developing countries for decades. So why Sweden? Sweden is well known to be one of the countries, one of the highest levels of gender equality in the world. Nevertheless, Sweden and Swedish women have also been affected adversely by the pandemic. The webinar will try to address the issue of gender equality in the workplace by presenting 5 speakers who will provide their perspectives on the issue. The Swedish perspective, the perspective of the private sector in Indonesia, the government perspective, the perspective of a Swedish company in Indonesia, and that of a regional perspective from a UN point of view. This webinar provides a rare and exciting opportunity to bring together the views of different stakeholders, which hopefully can provide a better understanding of gender equality for economic recovery, policy options, to look at the relevance of the Swedish experience in the context of Indonesia's very different situation in terms of attitudes, socio-political realities, religious influences, structural barriers, prevalent social norms, and economic and employment factors. All very challenging, it goes without saying. We hope that the webinar will provide some insights and maybe possible solutions. The webinar provides interpretation from English into Indonesian and vice versa, and the interpretation function will only work if you use Zoom app. Attendees can ask questions to the speakers by writing down their questions in the Q&A box. Without further ado, allow me to introduce the first speaker for today, Ambassador of Sweden, Marina Berg. Ambassador Berg, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Julia. Good afternoon, everyone in Indonesia, and good morning, Sweden. Thank you, Julia, and thank you to all of you who are participating in today's webinar, both as panelists and in the audience. We are about to have a very important conversation this afternoon on a topic that concerns all people. So the more who join, reflect, and take the discussion further, the better. I hope all of you who are tuned in also take this opportunity to put questions to the eminent panel we have here today. I would also like to thank the Swedish Institute for funding this event. I'm really happy that we have such an excellent panel of speakers, and I know that they will be getting into the details on how gender equality in the workplace can contribute to more sustainable economic recovery post-COVID-19. So I will be quick and just say a few words on why the Swedish Embassy is organizing this webinar. First of all, gender equality is an urgent issue. And just because the whole world is now rightly focusing on the COVID-19 pandemic, it has not become less urgent. Last year marked the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Platform for Action. It wasn't intended to be a groundbreaking year for gender equality. Instead, with the spread of the pandemic, even the limited gains made in the past decades are now at risk of being rolled back. The pandemic is deepening and amplifying pre-existing inequalities. And these in turn risk amplifying the effects of the pandemic. It all becomes a vicious circle. Across every sphere, from health to the economy, security to social protection, the effects of the COVID-19 are affecting women and girls the most, simply by virtue of their sex. Although men, on average, seem to suffer harder from the virus itself, women and girls are especially hurt by the resulting economic and social fallout. Impacts on women and girls have worsened across the board. Women are losing their livelihoods faster because they are more exposed to hard-hit economic sectors. But this, an important issue, while women and girls are being disproportionate, worst hit and affected by the pandemic, they also hold the key to sustainable economic recovery post-COVID-19. Engaging more women in the workforce and providing them with a level of playing field within it can lead to real gains, both in terms of economy and in gender equality. From the Swedish experience, we have an abundance of examples to share when it comes to what kind of policies can be put in place in the public sector as well as in the private, and why these are important. By organizing this webinar today, we want to share some of these Swedish experiences and to start a conversation around it in the Indonesian context. It is, of course, equally important to listen to and discuss with our Indonesian friends. This is why we have both the Director General of the Swedish Gender Equality Agency on this panel, together with the Indonesian stakeholders who can share their experiences and perspectives, and also together with international and regional expertise of the UN Women. Now, I would argue that gender equality is not really about women, nor is it about men. It is about people, all people. It's about humans, it's about human rights, about democracy and justice and opportunities. It is about making sure that everyone has the same democratic rights, the same access to justice and the same opportunities in life, regardless of gender. Gender equality should be seen as an engine that drives social development and creates genuine change in society and in people's lives. It is everyone's moral obligation to contribute towards this end. One of Sweden's contribution is that we have a feminist government, which has formulated a feminist foreign policy. This policy is based on the 3 R's: rights, representation, and resources. Rights can be about something as simple as the right not to be a gift, the right to schooling, the right to open a bank account, or to carry out economic activities. No woman needs to be given a voice. Everyone has a voice. What is needed is more listening. Representation is about women getting their voices heard. In the boardroom, in governments, or in parliaments. Women must be represented where decisions are being made about them and their future. And at the end of the day, all of this depends on how resources are being allocated. For governments to always ask the question, do we have enough budget to sufficiently address the needs of women and girls? This last question could be turned around. One could ask, do you have enough budget not to sufficiently address the needs of women and girls? Because other than being a moral issue, gender equality is also a very practical, tangible, economic one. Mm-hmm. Empowering women is simply essential in order to improve economic growth. Women and girls in Indonesia right now constitutes the half of the population. It is expected to reach above half of the population in 2045. We are talking about then more than 135 million people. Needless to say, greater female participation in the labor force would have defining impact on boosting the economy of this country. According to one study, advancing gender equality in Indonesia could add as much as $135 billion to annual GDP by 2025. But then we have to work fast. Finally, a few words. Last year, Sweden and Indonesia celebrated 70 years of diplomatic relations. And we did so by establishing something that we call the Sweden-Indonesia Sustainability Partnership, which is about finding ways through which various actors from our two countries, not least the business sector, can work together for and contribute to a sustainable development and a better future for all of us. Gender equality is, of course, a core pillar of that development and the future. I think our panel here today, under the wise guidance of Julia, can really give us some good examples and food for thought of what makes that pillar and how it can be strengthened. Without further ado, I thus leave the floor back to Julia. And once again, thank you for attending.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Marina Berg, for your very illuminating and encouraging speech. I couldn't agree more about the feminist government and feminist policy, whether foreign or national. I wish we had more of that here. We had just an iota of that, and I was very surprised to hear about the figures you mentioned about the addition of women in the workforce, which will add to the GDP. That will give the policymakers and the people in government to sit up and pay attention, I think, because in the end, as we say in Indonesia, it's ujung-ujungnya duit. In the end, it's about money. So practical, as you said. So I will proceed to the first speaker of this webinar, which is who is Ms. Lena Agh, the Director General of the Gender Equality Agency of Sweden, which was set up in January 1st, 2018, to contribute to effective implementation of Swedish gender equality policy. She holds a bachelor's degree in political science and history from Stockholm University. Previously, she held positions with the Swedish Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the European Commission. For many years, she was the executive director of a prominent civil society organization promoting women's rights with a global outreach. Lena Agh will be speaking about Sweden's most important reforms concerning gender equality in the labor market and in social policy, also in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. Lena Agh, the floor is yours. We look very much forward to hearing your presentation to learn more about Sweden.
Well, thank you very much, Julia. Ambassador, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Well, first I have to tell you that I am really pleased to have been invited to this seminar, but of course, next time I hope to be there in Indonesia in real life. Let's hope that we will come to this in the future. So my name is Lena Agh and I'm the Director General of the Swedish Gender Equality Agency, as you heard. And it is a rather new government agency under the Ministry of Employment, which was inaugurated in 2018, and it was created to contribute to the implementation of the Swedish gender equality policy. I will be speaking to you today about Sweden's most important reforms concerning gender equality in the labor market and in social policy, and also touch upon our remaining challenges and goals, also regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. I don't know if there are PowerPoints. I think there should be, but nevertheless, I will just continue and see if somebody is, yeah, you can do the number 2, please. So I will start by saying that Sweden is a welfare state and has a long history of various governments from various political parties promoting gender equality. It doesn't mean that all our goals are reached and that gender equality is once and for all achieved, that the work is all done. No, it is not. And I will get back to the challenges we face. But it is true that Sweden ranks high globally when it comes to gender equality. And how did we get there? What reforms, step by step, have contributed to gender equality so far? Mind you, we have been working on these issues for a very long time. Some of the most important reforms concerning gender equality took place in the labor market and in social policy already in the 1970s. These reforms were these reforms was an integral part of the creation of the modern welfare state and contributed to the overall economic growth and prosperity and social cohesion. The reforms increased women's participation in the labor market and aimed at a family model where both parents had paid work. Parts of the unpaid household and care work, often done by women, became the responsibility of the public welfare system. In addition, men were encouraged and enabled to participate in family life to a greater extent. Generous family benefits, flexible leave and working hours for parents with young children, and affordable, high-quality childcare and care for the elderly are main factors of success. So let's look at the welfare reforms that promoted gender equality in Sweden. First, we have the separate income taxation reform for wife and husband in 1971. This created an incentive for women to work, as their income was no longer seen as part of the husband's income. Therefore, it was better for both parents to work. Second, we have the development of public childcare. Also in the 1970s, the broad expansion of the daycare and preschool system began, as I said, in the 1970s. Previously, women had used the help of mothers, nannies, friends, and relatives, as is still the case in many parts of the world. Together with public elderly care. This gives families an opportunity to combine professional and family life. Third, paid parental leave benefit for women and men, introduced in 1974. In 1974, Sweden became the first country in the world to introduce a gender-neutral parental leave benefit. Today, women and men are entitled to 16 months of paid parental leave per child. 3 months are reserved for each parent and cannot be transferred to the other parent. The progress made towards gender equality has contributed to Sweden's high levels of employment and growth. A report from 2018 by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, states that the positive growth over the years in the Nordic countries is the result of women's extensive participation in the workforce in all of the Nordic countries. But this has not happened by itself. It is largely the result of political struggle and decisions, together with hard campaign work from a strong civil society and from the women's movement. Sweden has a long-term approach to gender equality policy, and its cornerstones are built on research, analysis, and gender-aggregated statistical data, so we can draw conclusions and know the effects of what we are doing. Of course, the financing of these reforms has been key, and so has legislation. Legislation and development of societal norms go hand in hand. As I said, we still have challenges. And if we look at the gender aggregated statistics and data, we can see that our work is not done. Women and men, girls and boys in Sweden still do not have access to resources and power on equal terms. If you look specifically at the labor market and economic equality, more women than men work part-time, for example. But studies show that many women, in fact, would prefer to work more and thereby earn more. The main reasons for many women working part-time are that they cannot find suitable full-time jobs, and the fact that women in Sweden still bear the brunt of the responsibility for children and for the domestic domain. In recent years, there are an increase in temporary employment, which affects women to a greater extent than men, making them more vulnerable to negative societal downturns in the economy. Differences in income between women and men can be explained by the clear gender segregation on the Swedish labor market. Some professions and sectors are dominated either by women or men, and this gender segregation starts already when young women and men choose their education. Sweden still has a 9% gender pay gap, as work in sectors dominated by women is generally valued less. For instance, the public sector, healthcare, education, services, etc. And these sectors have lower wage levels than the ones dominated by men, which is the private sector, business, IT, manufacturing, industry, etc. It is important to eliminate unjustified gender pay differentials, which is based on stereotypical norms. However, compared with other countries in the EU, Sweden has a larger proportion of women in gainful employment. Another goal of Sweden's national gender equality policy is equal distribution of unpaid housework and provisions of care. Active responsibility and participation by men and fathers benefits the whole family. Swedish men need to become much more involved in sharing unpaid domestic and care work. Men's equal caring and equal sharing of parental leave with women has proven to have a positive effect on the development of women's wages. And very importantly, it has had a positive effect on men's relationship with their children. The COVID-19 pandemic has, as everywhere, affected Sweden a lot. People have lost their lives to the disease, and family and friends have lost their loved ones. In Sweden, as well as globally, more men have died due to the coronavirus, but more women than men have been diagnosed with the disease. More women also suffer from long-term health effects after falling ill. Our healthcare system is under great pressure. More women than men are employed in this sector, and the pandemic has put the flashlight on the poor working conditions in our healthcare system, particularly in the elderly care, where almost 90% of the workforce consists of women. Unemployment has increased during the pandemic, and both the proportion of women and men in gainful employment has decreased in 2020.
Lena, may I remind you have 1 more minute? Do you have 1 more minute? May I remind you?
Yes, Julia, I will absolutely finish soon. The long-term impact on gender equality remains to be seen, though, however. The Swedish Gender Equality Agency estimates that the COVID-19 pandemic can lead to a negative impact on the development towards gender equality. The pandemic's consequences for the labor market and higher unemployment rates in Sweden can, for example, lead to increased gender pay gap. The gender segregated labor market is also one factor that needs to be taken into consideration when policies are designed. So, there are clear signs that men's violence against women may have increased in Sweden, and that women and children are more at risk for domestic abuse due to isolation and increased control during the pandemic. And the agency works together with regional and local authorities in Sweden to prevent domestic violence and reach out with information about where to seek help and support. So, when we do analysis of the effects of the pandemic and the way forward, we need to take into consideration gender equality. It needs to be taken into account in order for us to see the effects for women and men. So to end this intervention and to echo the ambassador's introduction, it is my and my government's firm conviction that equality between women and men, gender equality, contributes to a better society and a better life for all. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Lena Ak. It's obvious that despite the fact that Sweden has a very high gender equality, that the problems are just the same. So it's a matter of degree. But in the end, gender equality is like democracy. It's an ongoing process and struggle, and it's not something that you arrived. It's always a process. We will continue now with the second speaker, who is Dina Zut. She is the founder, owner, and managing director of CV Hako Mulya Abadi, which is a real estate company, and the owner and managing partner of PT Infinity Berkah Energy. In 2016, she obtained a master's degree in gender studies from the University of Indonesia. She is involved in a slew of social activities. She is a member of Iwafee, that is the Association of Indonesian Businesswomen. She is also a member of Kadin, that's the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce. She is the chairwoman of the Keluarga Perkawinan Campuran, which is about mixed marriages, because she belongs to a mixed marriage herself. And the organization, it's called Melati Melalui Tangan Ibu, which seeks to eliminate the many discriminative laws which apply to transnational marriages. She is also ambassador of Yayasan Musik Sastra Indonesia, which to help underprivileged children to have access to classic music. And she herself plays the violin. Wow, that's a really well-rounded personality. I would like to ask you, tell me what made you take up an MA in gender studies?
Oh, well, it's to make story short, actually, I would like to find an answer why as a woman, Indonesian woman married to non-Indonesian men, because of this marriage, my rights are reduced, even though I'm still holding Indonesian citizen and paying my obligation as citizen. My rights to own a property reduced, and I have to prove that I have a prenuptial or postnuptial agreement to separate our asset between husband and wife, which might not be beneficial for women in the end when you have those separate asset agreement. So it was not without struggle to get my master's degree on gender studies. I almost quit it though, because I learned more problems than I could anticipate when I study in Universitas Indonesia. But my mentors, my professors, and my friends are very supportive. And yeah, I cried almost every day in the class after learning how other women were treated, constructed in the name of social and cultural norms. So after shocking encounter with gender studies, now I think I'm rather stronger, and I'm so happy to meet you, Mbak Julia. You're one of I admire your article because provocative, but at the same time refreshing. So it is really enriching also. So I'm so glad and thank you so much for having me today. And so in order that I can voice and act to play my own role towards narrowing the gender gap, but like Helen Keller said 2 centuries ago, alone we can do little, but together we can do so much.
Oh, thank you very much for your explanation. So, well, in the feminists say the personal is political, and I can see that your motivation to do gender studies started from something very personal, and it always is that way. It has to be that way, and then usually it extends to other women. And so I'm glad you have done that. Quite honestly, when I came across your name, when your name was suggested to me, I was so pleased, because I thought this is the embodiment of this woman is the embodiment of this webinar. It's not well to find a woman who is a businesswoman, but also who cares about other women. That is what we need. Not just women, everybody has to care about everybody. So okay.
Thank you, Madam. So kind.
Please start with your presentation. We really look forward to hearing it. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mbak Julia. Yang terhormat Ibu Marina Berg, Ibu Lena A, Pak Faisal Reza, Ibu Diva Yohana, Pak Jamsuya Kazi. Hello, everyone. It's so honored to be with you all today virtually. So to learn firsthand Swedish stories and experiences in advancing gender equality. As Ibu Marina said earlier, that this is not about women only, but the rights of everybody, women and men. Despite, I think we have a presentation here. The slide, please. Despite the advancement of technology, next please. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. Despite the advancement of technology that bringing us to the digital age, sadly, globally, we are still struggling to achieve gender equality. The tagline today's discussion on money, power, and autonomy is right to the point. When women financially independent, we can have power and autonomy. We can lift up the adverse or harmful social and cultural norms that dictate the unequal status of women, define our roles in society, and limit our control, our own fertility and bodies. Therefore, realizing women's economic potential, not only in the workplace, I would like to propose to include the marketplace and community that will contribute significantly to progress towards reaching the sustainable development goals. As shown here in the infographic from Women Delivered, issued in September 2019, we shall invest in equality. Therefore, everyone can win. However, we do have the challenge here, as mentioned in the infographic, to achieve gender equality, such as more than 100 countries, including Indonesia actually, have laws on the books that restrict women's participation in the economy. In certain local governments, they restriction for women to participate in economy. So to empower women and girls, everyone has a role to play. The private sector, governments. I'm just happy what Ibu Marina and Ibu Lena presented today, how the Swedish government laid out the policy to promote gender equality and also multilateral organization and civil society. Me personally, from the private sectors, what challenge, next please. Next slide, yes. What challenge currently we are facing in a post-COVID-19 to rebuild the economy, as the work arenas with high levels of human interaction because of COVID-19 are likely to adopt automation and artificial intelligence that have caused low-wage workers such as part-time workers, low-degree workers, minorities, and women lost jobs. My business, sadly, also disrupted. I'm running a small-scale exclusive residential property and management services and trading companies, including furniture rental and also oil fuel distribution in the cities here in Indonesia. But I'm a believer that to sustain the business, I shall not think only about monetary profit, but how the business can promote environment and save planet to contribute people's prosperity. So layoffs was not one of the options. It is, thanks God, it's relief though. We can retain our employees, including permanent on-sites and in-house staffs. So during this challenging time, our company heavily reduced growth. We do not sit still though. We still keep ourselves active. We utilize the time to focus on internal improvement, build our storage for our furniture rental, redo our website, additional training and education programs for employee, set standard for safe work spaces for employee and customer, and also we set up customers protocols, among other improvements we made. So let me now go to Iwafee, Indonesian Businesswomen Association, the organization I joined. Women were hit harder. Therefore, we need to change, create programs, and to propose inclusive policy that no one is left behind. To change that, require more than one voice. So I believe when we together in Iwafee, our voices are stronger and hopefully louder to get access for women's full participation in the economy. I believe the women's economic empowerment is a powerful lever for change and can drive gender equality and broader intergenerational benefits for women, our families, communities, and countries. Therefore, to order to close gender gaps, we shall be able to unleash women's potential. There has to be a connection here, collaboration between all these different levels from national, let's say Kadin, Indonesian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, regional, global level. Otherwise, the impact will not be that strong. So we shall collaborate from private sector, civil society, such as Iwafee, government, multilateral organization. So beside Iwafee at the national level and then Kadin, well, I haven't done much in Kadin as very strong dominated there. So, but we enter the women empowerment for economics participation. Join the branch was joined only in 2019. So. So it's still hard to, still a lot of works to do. There is also AWEN in regional level. Asian Women Entrepreneurs Network is a network of business women to exchange knowledge, experience, develop and propose initiative to promote economic and trade activities in order to enhance gender equality, empower and strengthen entrepreneurship skills for women in ASEAN community. So there is also APEC here, Asia Pacific Economic Corporation. I've been 4 years become a jury members for APEC BEST, the Business Efficiency and Success Target Award. And in the global level, we do have G20. I joined Empower, and all those collaboration in our companies and also in Iwafee, Kadin, in all their organization will only work when inclusive environment is adopted and promoted, when we have respect, trust, cultural competence, appreciation of individual attributes, reward and recognition, access to opportunity, sense of belonging, common purpose or concerns. Then we all can work. So by narrowing the gender gap in the workplace globally, we can establish a large potential economic gain. McKinsey findings estimated by 11% higher growth, around about 12 trillion US dollars in 2025. Also, earlier, Ibu Marina already mentioned in 2025 in Indonesia, provided that every country pushes gender equality at the same historical rate, the fastest improving country in its regional peer group. So 2025 is just around the corner. Together in G20, currently this year is under the Italian presidency, and Indonesia is as co-chairs. Next year, G20 presidency will be Indonesia. As a member of G20 Empower Alliance, representing Indonesia from private sectors, together with Ibu Yesi on behalf of Excel Asiata and myself on behalf of Iwafee, supported by the representative from public sectors, the Ministry of Women Empowerment and Child Protection. The Empower Alliance is the private sector alliance for the empowerment and progression of women's economic representation. It was launched at 2019 G20 Summit in Japan in order to advocate for the advancement of women in the private sector. The alliance is intended to build and maintain in each G20 member a network within the private sector to identify challenges and to share evidence-based analysis, practical lessons learned, and knowledge to support the greater recruitment and advancement of women as business leaders. The Empower Alliance is expected to report at the G20 Summit on its progress and concrete efforts. So next slide, please. Last but not least, to push gender equality, it cannot be done by women only. Everyone has a role to play, from governments, the private sectors, multilateral organizations, and civil society. Stronger together, we can overcome the current work challenge for gender equality, environmental degradation to the planet, and COVID-19 to sustain our planet and the prosperity of the humankind. Thank you, Mbak Julia. I'm giving back the floor to you.
I'm sorry, I forgot to unmute. Thank you very much for your very interesting presentation, which is derived from your own personal experience, which is always the best kind of knowledge. I agree with you that there has to be a global effort, that it has to be national, regional, and global, because gender equality is a bit like the struggle to overcome COVID-19. It has to be a global effort. It cannot be a national thing, because they're we are all connected that way. It was good to hear also about the percentage, the growth because of women's participation, and I agree very much with you that everyone has a role to play. It's not just women for women, but everyone for everyone. I would like to remind all attendees to ask questions in the Q&A box. Please use this rare opportunity to communicate directly with the resource people here, who the speakers, who are resources for a lot of knowledge, and this is an opportunity to get them to answer your questions directly. We now move on to the third speaker, who is Faisal Reza. He is chairman of Commission 6 of the DPR, or House of Representatives. Commission 6 is in charge of trade, industrial investment, cooperatives, and small and medium-scale enterprises and state-owned enterprises affairs. Faisal Reza has a very interesting background, and he was an activist in the 1998 reform movement. He was kidnapped, tortured, but luckily he was one of the few released. He then went on to become a politician and has worked in various ministries, including the Ministry of Labor from 2009 to 2014 as special staff to the then Minister Mohaimin Iskandar. His personal interests include philosophy. He studied at the famous Jayakara School of Philosophy in Jakarta from 2001 to 2005. We really need philosopher politicians. That is what we need. And rock climbing, and was the chairman of the Indonesian Rock Climbing Federation from 2015 and to 2019. He still does rock climbing up to now. I think we should all try our hand at that. A personal detail: he is married to an Italian, so a foreigner, just like Ibu Rina. Antonia Soriente, a linguist, one of the best in her field, and she and I happen to be old friends. Unfortunately, Faisal Reza is unable to join us in person today, as he is currently in the region with his constituents. Among others in Probolinggo is Java, which just by chance is where he was born. At noon today, again, he expressed his apologies on not being able to join personally. He told me he was just about to join some potato farmers in Mount Bromo. So in his very busy schedule, he has very kindly taken the time to prepare a video for this webinar, which will provide the government perspective of the topic of gender equality in the workplace. May we have the video, please? Thank you.
Saya bagi dalam kesempatan webinar. Selamat sore, salam sejahtera buat kita semua. Yang saya hormati Ibu Marina Berg, Duta Besar Swedia untuk Indonesia dan Timur Leste, para panelis, Ibu Lena AG, Director General of Sweden's Gender Equality Agency, Ibu Jamsuya Kazi, Representative and Liaison to ASEAN, UN Women Indonesia, Rina Zud, Entrepreneur, anggota Kadin dan Iwafee, Ibu Diva Yohana, Store Manager Ikea Indonesia, dan sahabat saya Ibu Julia Surya Kusuma yang menjadi moderator pada sore hari ini, serta Bapak Ibu sekalian, para peserta webinar Her Rights, Money, Power, and Autonomy. Mari kita bersama-sama menjaga seluruh aktivitas kita sehari-hari sehingga kita bisa diberikan kesehatan dan survive dalam masa pandemi COVID-19 ini. Berikutnya mengenai gender equality yang harusnya dilakukan oleh pemerintah. Saya terus terang melihat percepatan persetujuan DPR di Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja maupun kecepatan pemerintah untuk menerbitkan peraturan pemerintah yang menjadi beban dari Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja ini terlalu sempit ruang yang kita miliki masyarakat pada umumnya melihat mana saja kekurangan-kekurangan yang ada dan perlu diperbaiki melalui peraturan pemerintah. Ambil contoh saja mengenai PP yang terkait investasi di sektor minuman beralkohol kemarin, setelah diterbitkan ditandatangani oleh Presiden lalu diprotes oleh kelompok-kelompok masyarakat, akhirnya pemerintah mencabut lampirannya. Nah, kita tidak tahu sejauh ini ada puluhan peraturan pemerintah yang sudah diteken oleh Presiden, itu sejauh mana keberpihakannya pada gender equality. Oleh karena itu masih ada kesempatan buat kita untuk melakukan perbaikan terhadap PP turunan dari Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja ini. Kemudian yang terakhir Bapak Ibu sekalian, terkait mengenai bagaimana cara meningkatkan gender equality di tempat kerja, saya berpikir seharusnya kita punya 3 jalan yang harus berkesinambungan, berjalan secara bersama-sama. Titik pusatnya menurut saya ada di sistem vokasional kita, sertifikasi dan penempatan kerja. Sejauh 3 saluran penempatan tenaga kerja ini belum berpihak kepada gender equality, memang sulit kita untuk mendapatkan harapan gender equality ini bisa sampai 50%. Kita tahu sistem pendidikan kita masih sangat kurang, terutama untuk unit vokasional. Oleh karena itu pemerintah sangat fokus untuk vokasional ini. Tapi saya melihat belum ada keberpihakan di sistem pendidikan vokasional kita kepada gender equality. Oleh karena itu dorongan kita untuk pendidikan, sistem pendidikan vokasional ini mengadop gender equality ini akan menentukan apakah di masa yang akan datang kita akan melihat situasi yang sama seperti hari ini atau menjadi lebih baik. Jadi Kementerian Pendidikan dan Kebudayaan memegang peran sangat penting di dalam menciptakan gender equality di masa yang akan datang. Yang kedua, sertifikasi profesi. Sertifikasi profesi ini kita tahu di bawah salah satunya adalah BNSP, Badan Nasional Sertifikasi Profesi, belum memiliki satu sikap untuk mengadop gender equality. Dengan sikap yang seperti ini seharusnya LSP maupun sertifikasi profesinya sendiri itu akan jelas memberikan ruang di mana kaum perempuan bisa mendapatkan equality yang mereka harapkan di lapangan pekerjaan. Nah, dorongan ini penting melalui Kementerian Tenaga Kerja maupun BNSP. Kemudian yang ketiga, sistem penempatan sistem penempatan kerja yang dibuat baik di Kementerian Tenaga Kerja maupun di Kementerian Perindustrian yang sekarang keduanya sama-sama menjalankan satu program 3-in-1, yaitu pelatihan, kemudian sertifikasi, dan kemudian penempatan tenaga kerja menjadi satu sistem yang mereka jalankan. Walaupun kecil, tapi menurut saya sebagai ilustrasi bahwa pemerintah punya keberpihakan terhadap gender equality, sistem penempatan tenaga kerja juga harus mengadop gender equality, nilai-nilai ini. Jadi dorongan masyarakat kepada kementerian-kementerian maupun lembaga yang terkait dengan sistem vokasional sampai penempatan tenaga kerja ini akan menentukan betul masa depan dari isu mengenai gender equality kita. Saya kira hal-hal semacam ini yang bisa saya bagi dalam kesempatan webinar, dan saya meminta maaf tidak bisa bergabung karena masih ada di daerah untuk menjalankan tugas saya sebagai anggota DPR, bertemu dengan masyarakat di daerah-daerah yang sulit terjangkau dengan informasi. Sekali lagi terima kasih atas kesempatan yang diberikan, dan saya berharap isu ini akan menjadi isu yang terus-menerus kita usung bersama-sama agar keberpihakan pemerintah di dalam regulasi jelas, nyata, dan bisa kita jalankan dan mendapatkan masa depan yang lebih baik. Terima kasih, kurang lebihnya mohon maaf. Selamat sore.
Thank you, Reza, for your presentation. I was very glad to hear that you certainly seem to be one of a state official who is aware of gender issues. Maybe I'd like to share a few points. What I got from Faisal Reza's presentation. He mentioned a number of things, a number of, for example, the omnibus law, and then various other regulations which have been put forward by the government, but he says it's not yet possible to know what effect it has on gender equality. He stated, which I agree very much, that the educational system here is still lacking. And this is not just to do with women, but also with, or girls, but also with boys. I think we rank quite low in that respect, even amongst the Asian or even Southeast Asian countries. He said that there is no keberpihakan. On vocational, he talks about vocational education, and he says that, which is really important because it can immediately lead to employment, but there is no direction in gender equality when it comes to vocational education. And this is actually quite surprising because we have had the gender mainstreaming has been officially adopted by the Indonesian government. It's called PUG, Pengaruh Utamaan Gender, which is abbreviated as PUG. It's been around since 15 years. So we are really quite lagging in this respect. Faisal Reza also mentioned the 3-in-1 approach from the government, which is training, certification, and job placement, which needs to be imbued with gender equality values. And this is not, we are not yet there, but it's good to know that there is, that Faisal Reza, as the chairman of Commission 6, has that very much in his mind. So thank you, Faisal Reza, for your presentation in absentia. So now we go on to the fourth speaker, who is Diva Johanna. She is set to be the store manager of Ikea, Kota Baru Parahyangan in Bandung, which is projected to open in the first quarter of the year. She has a bachelor's degree in natural sciences from Pajajaran University in Bandung. She joined Ikea 7 years ago when it opened its first store in Jakarta. So she has been living in, in Jakarta, working in Jakarta for 6 years when she was appointed store manager. And, when she will be appointed straight store manager, she will relocate to Bandung, which is her hometown. Her areas of work are retail, store management, sales management, and people management, which is probably the hardest. Ikea is a showcase for Sweden and the principles of gender equality in that the country espouses. Ikea is such a global brand name that I am not sure whether most Indonesians even know that it is Sweden. I said Sweden with a Swedish accent, didn't I? And Sweden, except for the Swedish meatballs in Ikea, which I don't eat anyway. Without further ado, I hope that Diva's presentation will show how they do it in Ikea Indonesia, which now has 2 stores, soon to be 3. Diva, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Ibu Julia. And thank you, Swedish Embassy, for the opportunity, Your Excellency Ambassador Marina Berg, and to all panelists. I'm so delighted to be here and to share a little bit of how IKEA, a Swedish company, implementing a gender equality principle in Indonesia. I will start by sharing a brief history of IKEA. Can the slide please be shown? Yes, next slide please. IKEA was founded in a small village of Älmhult in Sweden by Ingvar Kamprad in 1943. And since then, we've gone from being a tiny mail order company to becoming one of the most well-known home furnishing brands in the world. And by 2020, globally, we have 443 IKEA stores with total 217 co-workers worldwide. While in Indonesia, we opened our first store in 2014 in Alam Sutra, Tangerang, and the second store were opened in 2019 in Sentul. And this year, we're going to open our third and fourth store in Bandung and East Jakarta. Over the 7 years, we have grown from 400 to more than 1,000 co-workers this year in Indonesia. Next slide, please. Everything in IKEA starts with our vision, that is to create a better everyday life for the many people. This is how we work together that makes this vision in reality across department and all of our location. This influences everything we do, the product that we develop, the idea that we share, material that we use, yes, literally every little thing. That's why our vision is so powerful and so delicate at the same time. Our vision is the compass that leads all of us to the same direction. It keeps us grounded and focused on being accessible and also inclusive and to do what's best for the many. It's a vision that lives in everyday effort for all of our coworkers all over the world. Next slide, please. So we started the vision as we started with the vision as fantastic base to build on. People has always been the center of IKEA through our vision, through our relentless focus on our values. IKEA is built on optimistic attitude toward people. Our humanistic approach means a belief in everyone wish to take responsibility and desire to do their best. A strong IKEA culture inspires, challenges, and empowers us to be the best that we can be, regardless our gender. Working together, leading by example, finding better ways, and getting things done. Trust and respect are the key as we strive to make each other better. Equality is at our core. All people in IKEA are valued and heard. Respect is shown for individual uniqueness and the right to be oneself. Through an inclusive culture and our never-ending work for diversity, we provide an equal opportunities and togetherness. We are at our best when we can be ourselves while living the IKEA cultures. Diversity and inclusion increase our understanding for our customer, to each other, and then it's also instrumental for innovation based on our vision. Next slide, please. People choose to work for IKEA with different reasons. There are wishes for safe, secure, fair terms of employment. There are wishes for opportunities to grow, to foster personal and professional qualities. And then there's also a feeling of purpose, pride, and a desire to be part of something bigger. Our long-term social commitment is to create a better world for many people. That makes IKEA attractive. We side with the many people. We embrace development that makes people's life better, guided by our values. By keeping their best interests in our mind, we can create positive change for families and communities. By growing our business in an inclusive way, providing decent and meaningful employment, and also promoting equality and diversity, we play a part by creating a fair and equal world in which we encourage each other to be ourselves. Next slide, please. Gender diversity in Indonesia is relatively equal at all levels, and what we're proud of is the highest proportion for female coworkers sits at senior level. So we are happy to see that more female coworkers are advancing their career within our organization. Next slide, please. We take action in our company that drive movement in equality and promoting gender diversity. The first one is value-based recruitment. We know that sometimes when it's come to recruitment, there are some gender bias or gender preferences for certain role and function. However, in IKEA, we have our unique way on doing recruitment based on our value. This is a fantastic way to achieve our direction. Recruiting the right competence based on our value is critical to secure the diversity, whether we recruit for existing business or expand into new territories. The second one is no gender pay gap at any level. We have defined and implement an IKEA approach for responsible wage practices and secure a standard that we can proud of. The third one is investing in female-friendly policy and working condition. Coworker health and well-being is always at our heart and a part of IKEA uniqueness. We anticipate a new requirement and regulation where we together contribute to a fair, equal, and healthy everyday life. As IKEA employers, we bring out the best of life stages and experiences. Example of the policy within the company to support gender diversity is a female coworkers entitled the same insurance like male coworker to cover their family. And we also provide the relevant facility to support female coworkers such as nursery room. The fourth one is progressing women into leadership position. We continue to invest in people as part of our DNA. We are supporting women empowerment by offering exciting job journeys, structured learning opportunities, and also learning in the business where coaching brings experience and strengthen our cultures. We utilize our learning journey as an opportunity to grow and to stay eager to match challenge to capability, creating opportunities for female coworkers to perform with a meaning. We build on strength to competence flow, where coworkers contribute in new assignments across IKEA. As the situation with COVID-19 continues to develop, IKEA Indonesia is taking part in preventing the spread of this and give it priority attention. This is an opportunity to reinvent ourselves again. This means moving into the unknown, learning new things, challenging familiar ways of thinking and doing. During this pandemic, retail in the industry is one of the segments which has been negatively impacted by this. However, in IKEA Indonesia, by working hard together, not only we have managed to secure all the jobs within the organization, but we have and will also recruit new coworkers into the business aligned with our plan to expand. As the health and safety for our coworkers is our priority, companies support by providing face masks, vitamin for coworkers and also their family. We support female coworkers in pregnant condition by giving them a full work from home during their pregnancy period. All in all, IKEA Indonesia is committed to continue to support women empowerment and gender diversity in workplace. Next slide, please. And as we say in IKEA, many things remain to be done. Glorious future. Thank you. Back to you, Bu Julia.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Diva. You have not disappointed me. You have clearly shown that IKEA does embody the gender equality values that Sweden espouses. I remember now that when we were talking about her work in IKEA, Diva was saying to me that IKEA for her is like family, not just because she joined from the very beginning when it first opened, but I'm sure it has something to do with the fact that these gender equality values. IKEA Indonesia ticks all the boxes when it comes to gender equality, gender pay gap, female-friendly policies, value-based recruitment, and promoting women in leadership positions. And in the end, that caring about people is what makes a company prosper. So it's not about profitability, it's about prosperity, which is not to do with money, but with having a value-based life. Okay, so now, last but not least, we come to the final speaker for this webinar. We have Jamsuya Kazi, a representative of UN Women in Indonesia. He is the first male representative of UN Women that I have ever come across. So when I found him, I was really excited not in a way that a woman is excited about a man, but because it's so rare. And I think that we should have these, gender role, not role reversals, but anybody can, it's not about your biological sex, it's about your attitudes, about your values, whether you espouse gender equality or not. So Jamsuya Kazi hails from Bangladesh and has a very international background. He has a master's degree in public administration, development studies from Harvard University and London School of Economics. His areas of work are development cooperation, gender equality, human rights, democratic governments, because they're all absolutely, totally connected. Jamsuya possesses over 20 years of diverse field and senior management experience spanning across Asia and the Pacific, East Africa and Europe and the Commonwealth independent states in the fields of democratic governance, program management, interagency coordination, human rights, women's empowerment and environment policy with several UN agencies and the NGO sector. Immediately prior to assuming his current function in Indonesia, Mr. Kazi served as the UN Women's Representative in Pakistan since 2015. The title of his presentation is Closing the Gender Equality Gap in ASEAN and Indonesia, which I think speaks for itself and doesn't need, and Jamsuya will obviously elaborate on this topic. So over to you, Jamsuya.
Thank you very much, Julia, Excellency Ambassador Marina Berg, my dear distinguished fellow panelists, Selamat Sore, and good morning to those in Sweden. I think it's still morning there. I just want to say that, of course, coming at the tail end with a bit of a compressed time schedule and also attention spans waning, I will have to make an extra effort to keep your attention, and I will do my best at doing so. Again, I'm very grateful, very humbled, also a great admirer of Julia's work in the area of feminism and gender equality in Indonesia. I've been trying to read up as much on that as I can. If the slides are ready, what I thought I would do actually is I wear two hats, pretty much as the liaison of UN Women to ASEAN, which is based in Jakarta, and also the Indonesia country office. So what I thought I would do as quickly as I can is really share with you some exciting findings we've recently concluded of the condition of women in the wider ASEAN region. And then what I'm going to do is zoom into just a small element of women in the workplace in Indonesia. So let me just quickly start with giving the bigger picture. Next slide, please. Next slide. So the promise of leaving no one behind can only be realized if the SDGs are achieved for all women, girls, men, and boys. But the data for the ASEAN region, as you can see, shows that select groups of women are disadvantaged. The poverty rates have increased over the past year in several ASEAN countries. And in places like Cambodia and Indonesia, women are now more likely than men to live below the poverty line. In the ASEAN region, 56% of women participate in the labor force, compared with 79% of men. And of those employed, an estimated 67% are engaged in the informal sector, and 3% are employed but live in poverty. Initiatives to guarantee productive employment and decent work for all should target young women ages 15 to 24. In 2019, 24% of them were outside of school but had no jobs, compared to 13% of young men. Attention should be placed on women with children who often step out of the labor market to take care of unpaid domestic and care responsibilities. Only 33% of mothers with newborns have access to benefits across the ASEAN region. And a similar proportion of women also saw increases in the intensity of unpaid domestic work, cooking, cleaning, homeschooling, more than double the rate that of men. Next slide, please. So now looking at the how environmental degradation is putting the woman's life and health at stake. ASEAN countries have seen an increase in the frequency and magnitude of drought and flood episodes over the past decades as a result of climate change. For women who depend disproportionately on natural resources for their livelihoods, this has important consequences. So in Lao PDR, for instance, as many as 64% of employed women are engaged in agriculture, and we know their livelihoods are at stake. When we look at, furthermore, coastal tourism, we find, drives much of the tourism revenue in many ASEAN countries, which represents 18% of all exports in Thailand and 9% in the Philippines. Women are more likely also than men to engage in tourism-related jobs. With so many women whose livelihoods depend on the ocean, it is important that ASEAN countries place marine conservation at the center of their development priorities. ASEAN countries are also home to 15% of the world's tropical forests, but also see the most alarming deforestation rates in the world. Over the past decades, men have abandoned many of these degraded lands and have migrated to urban areas to find jobs, leaving women in charge of repurposing it. And while women are often the users of agricultural land, holdings are still concentrated in the hands of men. In Indonesia, Lao PDR, and Philippines, an estimated 90% of agricultural holders are men. Next slide, please. So in ASEAN countries have furthered gender equality in recent years, but we know that women and girls living in the poor rural households in particular are still far from achieving most of the Sustainable Development Goals. And this goes back to the concept of multiple forms of discrimination being clustered together. For example, maternal mortality in the ASEAN region has dropped from 214 to 137 per 100,000 live births in the past 2 decades, partly due to increased access to healthcare, including OB/GYN professionals. About 90% of the deliveries in the region are now attended by skilled professionals, but for women living in the rural areas and the poorest households, this figure is much lower. 33% of births remain unattended. In all ASEAN countries with available data, less women are more likely to marry early and become adolescent mothers. This in turn keeps them out of paid jobs and reduces their decision-making power, including matters regarding their own health. And speaking of health, during COVID-19, women's health, both physical and mental, suffered disproportionately, and 30% of women reported not being able to seek medical advice when needed, always often putting their families ahead of themselves. And in 2020, Indonesia alone sent more than 2,600 troops and other personnel to UN peacekeeping missions around the world. And in almost every ASEAN country, more male than female officers are deployed. Next slide. So now I want to zoom into the Indonesian context in brief, and next slide. So what I wanted to do is I've painted the canvas in a very broad way, and I wanted to look at Indonesia, because of time limitations, through the lens of one particular sector that affects women, and this is women-owned enterprises only. Here, just to say that the micro, small, and medium enterprises, which make up most of the enterprises in Indonesia, by and large, they are managed by women, over 64%. During COVID-19, it became more apparent that women start those businesses due to necessity, oftentimes because they're pushed into employment, either because they cannot secure formal wages or that their men have also lost jobs. Third, these women businesses tend to operate in the lower end of the value chain in an informal sector. And finally, we find that access to skill development, market, and capital to grow are continuing to be challenging for women. And this is something I think we've heard from some of the other speakers, where because of discriminatory norms, because of all the layers of challenges, constraints, access to capital, access to legal knowledge, skills, women are at a disadvantage. Next slide. So this is my last slide, I believe, and these sets of recommendations only corresponds to my previous slide around when we look at small women in micro, small, medium enterprises. One of the key findings that we had is there was a lot of challenge in us being able to gather data because it's so hard to come across. So it's very important that those of us who can invest in data collection in a sex disaggregated manner across the board. So it just doesn't only apply to small and medium enterprises. Secondly, I think it's important for policymakers, for all of us, to pay particular attention to targeting women-owned medium small enterprises because they are still the bulk of Indonesian economy is reliant on these women, including in the informal sector. There is a great deal of digital divide. We found that access to technology was a great enabler, and as Indonesia is much more technologically savvy, digitally savvy, women do fall behind unless they have the same access to mobile phones, smartphones in order to even promote their e-commerce and businesses. The other recommendation was around the stimulus packages during COVID. The stimulus packages often were being sent out to male-headed households, not always women-headed households or even women-owned businesses. So that was something we saw there was a bit of a gap. It's also important, and this was raised again, the unpaid care and domestic work burden is extremely heavy on women. And unless really men help in shifting that divide, we will not see much more improvement because women are already burdened doubly and triply. So men do have to come up to the plate and share the load, as they say, in the home. And finally, this is more generic, it's very important. All of us work in our own sectors. We try as best as we can, but we have to do a better job in trying to make sure that we can connect with private sector, with government, with CSOs in a much more joined up fashion. And I think this kind of webinar, this kind of seminar really helps in bringing together people from different sectors, the UN, to be able to see what each of us are doing and what we can bring to the table. So with that, I'm sorry if I run a little over time. I tried to be quick, and back to you, Julia. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Jamshed, for your presentation, which is always really useful, I find to have this comparative perspective, and especially since Indonesia is supposed to be the giant of Southeast Asia, but it doesn't mean that we are the best in everything. But it's good to see the commonalities and to see how we can learn from each other. And I'm really one of the things you pointed out is the domestic work. Women do more. That's even the case in Sweden, so that's not really surprising. And I'm very glad that you brought about the issue of environmental degradation, because it's and how it affects women's life. It affects all of our lives, but some women are very directly their lives depend on it. And of course, gender equality is class-based, and there are multiple levels of discrimination, which is so true. Gender equality in Indonesia, women are, if you go to Solo, the market in Solo, it's all women. It's all women. So really not surprising at all to say that small and medium enterprises are owned by women. So for me, this webinar is actually an appetizer. It's so rich actually, and we're only getting a little taste of all the things that we need to delve into. Unfortunately, I have to go into practical and realistic matters, and that we're running a little bit late. We were supposed to end at 4:30, but we are running late. We were supposed to end at 4:30, and we are just about to start the Q&A session. So some panelists had to leave. Actually, Ilana Ag, I hope the other panelists can stay to answer any questions that might arise. So yeah, so I think some questions have been identified. I believe they will be put on the, okay, thank you very much. So this is we are now officially starting the Q&A session, and these are two questions that have come up. It's from Rifki from ITB, that's in Bandung, that's the Bandung Technology Institute, I think. I'm not sure what the official translation is. So the first question is, even though the maturity of the Swedish public in regards to gender equality, how can gender-based violence still persist despite good understanding of gender equality in Swedish society? The second question is, what mainly causes the gender pay gap in Sweden, even though there is already paid parental leave in place? I think these are really good questions, and I understand these questions were actually aimed at Lena Ag, but since she had to leave, so I believe that Ambassador Marina Berg will respond to these questions. So Marina, over to you.
Okay, now I think you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yes, I will try to answer the questions. Of course, Lena would have been better set for those two questions, but the first one, sexual abuse and harassment and violation, yes, it still exists in Sweden. And how could that be? Because we actually have some kind of understanding what gender equality is all about, and the rights of women. But discrimination and discriminating norms and attitudes against women is a global phenomenon. It happens everywhere. So it has always to be pinpointed and focused at, and we always have to work and contribute to an end, to end this. And that is an obligation to all and everyone to work for. It should start early in age. And let me talk and say some words as a mother. Raising children, you should make no difference between raising a boy or a girl. Treat them as much as the same as possible. That is the most important thing, to actually lay the basis and foundation for good attitudes and norms at early age. And it should also be part of education. So, of course, this is not answering the question, how can it actually exist in Sweden? But as long as we have, I mean, the world is violent, but we all have to work to stop discriminating norms and attitudes. It's all our everyone's obligation. The second question is about the differences in wages, right? And how can it still exist in Sweden? Well, we still lag behind. We still have challenges in Sweden. We have seen improvements and in the women's wages the last decades, but we have not reached the goal, not yet. We still have to work to work consistently on policy reforms, and also what is very important is to find the data to actually see where the differences do still exist. And Lena mentioned some of the sectors where women are a majority are actually the sectors where wages are the lowest. So yes, we have differences in wages still. But as Lena also said, we still have challenges in Sweden, and you just pointed out two of them. Thank you.
Sorry, I keep on forgetting to unmute myself. Thank you very much, Marina, for your reply. But it's very true. I mean, human beings are human beings in the end, and as I said earlier, gender equality is like democracy. It's a process. It's not actually, it's not utopia either. It's a process that we have to keep on fighting for. There is a question that I would like to ask to all of the panelists. 85% of the, here it is, of the audience in this webinar are women. How can we engage more men for the cause of gender equality? Maybe this is something that Jamshed can, maybe I can give the first opportunity to Jamshed to speak on this, because he is a man in leading what is understood to be an organization for women. So can you, I mean, I would like the others to reply as well, but to respond to this question, but maybe start with Jamshed, because I think all fingers are pointing at you at this point.
Thank you, Julia, for putting me on the spot on this one. I'm happy to. I think it's but the point before, I think that Ambassador Berg mentioned, if I can just briefly also touch upon that as well. It's a very good question about gender-based violence and why it continues to occur in countries that you wouldn't otherwise expect it to. I think the assumption we are making is that with education levels and with income levels, gender-based violence will necessarily drop, that there is a linear progression. As you get more educated, as countries develop, you will be a less violent society and you will treat your women better. Generally, that holds true, but we cannot assume that that is how it works. We've seen that sometimes we deal with cases here in Indonesia and elsewhere where women are being beaten by husbands who hold PhDs. You know, it's not because they are somehow more educated, but I think it's about the changing of social norms and actually men being able to hold other men to account. Mm. So, and this comes to my second point, the second question as to, you know, when I'll be quite honest, I've been doing this job with UN Women for 6 years, and I've noticed that when there is a webinar or seminar that has the title gender or woman in it, you are unlikely to find men because they consider that to be not relevant to them, because gender kind of is synonymous with woman somehow. And even worse if you use the word feminism, because then it's a short thing to scare away any men and even some women. So I think one is to be able to, frankly, I think sometimes I deliberately change titles or adapt titles of seminars that is actually about trade, that is actually about infrastructure. We talk about energy because that's what the men think is important. And once they're there, we add in the dimensions that have to do with gender. So I think the first thing is to make sure that you're attracting men to a conversation they want to be part of. And then once they're there, you have a captive audience. Mm. So it is very hard to get men in the room because, you know, most of us around the room, the audience, they agree with us. They are cheerleaders for this movement. They are standing there passionately. And you'll find some peculiar anomalies like myself who are quite passionate about this work. But again, and I encourage more men and boys, but it's still not considered to be a profession or something cool to do. You know, being a man in this field, I think, is a little bit tricky because one, you often don't get trusted by women because they say, well, Mr. Kazi, you, quite frankly, you don't possess a uterus, so you don't know what we are feeling. And for the men, it's they will say to me, well, Jamshed, why do you do this? Don't you have anything better to do? I mean, of all the things you could do, why do you do this job? So I think we have to make it more acceptable, like Ambassador Berg said, to make our boys as well as our girls, but our boys particularly, to let them know this is an issue, this is connected to human rights, it's connected to all these issues, and you need to take as much of an interest in this and be an ally and be a supporter and be as passionate about this issue as about any other issue. So I pause there.
Okay, is there anybody else who would like to respond to this question? Rina, perhaps? Rina, are you still there? May I say something then in that case to what just to respond to what Jamsuya said? It's very true that it's not about your biological sex, it's about your mental mindset, and women can be just as patriarchal as men. And in fact, several years ago, about 10 years ago, I wrote a column called "My Mother, the Patriarch." I was actually brought up in a very patriarchal family, so I don't know how I managed to escape that. But I think it's very true. I have also experienced that if you have an event or a webinar or a seminar or whatever which has the title women or gender or feminism, then that's automatically it's associated with women, and we really need to change the perception. I'm glad to tell you that in Indonesia there is a group of feminist men, and it's not very prominent yet, but I think maybe someday either the Swedish embassy or the UN Women or a collaboration of the two of you can host a webinar on that, on male feminists, which I think is a very important issue to address. How do we get men to join into this, because it's actually to their benefit as well. It's not just about women, it actually does benefit men as well. So any other speaker who wants to say anything? We are now at 4:50, almost 4:50. So we're gone over by almost 20 minutes. So maybe I can direct the floor back to Ambassador Berg to ask her for her comments on after this webinar, which is long anticipated webinar, which we have worked so hard on, to what your impressions are of this event and what your hopes are for the future.
Thank you, Julia. That's quite a huge task, but I have a few impressions. And first of all, I really need to say that Sweden and Indonesia, we are definitely two very different countries, but at the same time, we share some of the some challenges that are similar. And we also share that we still have a lot of work to do, hard work to do lies ahead of us in order to reach the goal of gender equality. And many things, as Diva was saying, many things remain to be done. And there is a lot of work to do together. It has been evident today. And what is also evident today is that we need to continue our focus on women and girls' rights and representations and resources. And we need to invest in gender equality. Investing in gender equality is investing in the future. What also is evident, listening to Lena, is that we need strong political support to reach gender equality, and also, of course, political reforms that is helping us reaching our goals, and also together sharing, like in this kind of event, experiences that we have, and also learn from each other. What also has been evident is that the private sector is very important and plays a central role in reaching gender equality. It is very crucial that labor laws includes what is needed to reach gender equality, and what we see in the corporate social responsibilities is very important. And when implementing them, we learn a lot about inclusiveness and to share experiences, of course, as well. But that is something that the private sector really can play an important role implementing the corporate social responsibility to securing success within the businesses, but also securing economic growth. And as Rita was saying, everyone has to have a good life at work. We spend a lot of time working. And we know, everyone, listening to everyone, to all the speakers today, that gender equality does not happen by itself. I said in my introduction that today's topic is urgent, and we have learned it is urgent. Just to mention one reason why it's urgent. Women today, women that is living women today, none of us have experienced gender equality. Just think about that.
Yes.
Every firm action we take makes a difference. And that is also something that we have to remember. And today, and all the participants and the audience have made a difference. And for that, I'm very thankful. And even if it is 2021, our work has to be persistent and it has to continue. Words will never take us anywhere. Action is what actually is needed. And to all of you still listening and being patient, holding on to this event, let your voices be heard and continue listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Marina, for your, well, actually it was supposed to be closing remarks, but apparently there is another question which is put forward. Can it be put on the screen, please? Okay, it says here, it is from Cynthia, English first. First of all, I really like the whole content here. We are in the company going towards the direction where we just created our own internal DEIB team. What is that? And the question is, how do you think we can educate women who normalize the gender role? Would anybody like to respond to this question? Anybody? Or is that a rhetorical question?
Let me just say that I think I hand over this question to one of our Indonesian friends at the panel.
Rina, perhaps? Putting you on the spot.
Thank you, Julia. So I think with regards to the education, Indonesia almost, not really lag behind, but with regards to the questions from the English first, to put the gender equality in education, I think, like already explained earlier, that everyone get the same access, and of course, in the way that in the course, is that in terms of your company, or so? I just actually really I didn't get the questions really straight, but Julia. So what does it mean? So the question is rather, Perhaps I didn't get really.
Yeah, no, it's not very clear. I think this is my guess. I think what they're trying to say is that how to make it not as the differentiate, have this view that male, women, men roles, you know, that, so, okay, thank you for putting the question up again. This is, I think this is where Rina is confused. How can you get women to normalize the gender role? I think that's a little bit confusing, but I think what it means, is my guess, is just not to see themselves in boxes, you know, because we are, the moment we are born, what's the first thing that we hear? It's a girl or it's a boy. And that is the beginning of the socialization process of where we become girls and women, and we become boys and men, and we become these, we become and play these gender roles according to the roles that society imposes on us. My parents didn't succeed with me. I was a tomboy, but I think it's really hard to resist that. I think maybe I can answer by going back to what Ambassador Berg said, also basically, and what I said also earlier about gender mainstreaming. It has to be something that's not looking at people because of their gender, but because of their capability, for example. You know, that is something that came out in the presentation by Diva about a value-based recruitment. So it's not, oh, you work in the whatever, I don't know, whatever sector is usually associated with women and men with more technological stuff, for example, whereas with women it's more like human resources, dealing with people, because it's not quite like that, you know. It's not we are not intrinsically wired that way.
So I believe because we do have cultural and social norms that's really put women in containment. So like in Iwafee, because I'm the head for education and advocacy and training, I believe for the education part that we have to really build confidence.
It's 17 hours.
Confidence for our students or our participants in the company or in the course. So with confidence, build up the confidence, and then let the voice, the ambassador and Mbak Julia already said, let the women's students to voice their concern, whatever, and then when they have confidence, they can voice whatever they have in mind. That I think with that will be a very outspoken like you, Mbak Julia.
Yes, my parents could never get me to shut up. I was struck by what Ambassador Berg said, that none of us have experienced gender equality. That was like, wow, that is so true. We have not experienced that. So which is quite amazing. You know, we are, you know, the religions teach us that people are, human beings are created equal. The constitutions of most of our countries, certainly democratic ones, say that human beings are created equal, but this is to do with the rhetoric. And this is especially hard, but you know, these habits and of course customs, traditional customs and mores and religion really die hard, and they become more deeply entrenched somehow in times of crisis. As we know, the world is becoming more conservative, and there's a democratic decline worldwide. And the pandemic is certainly helping to strengthen that tendency. But that only means that we have to fight back even harder. And it's very true that it requires political will. It requires cooperation between various sectors, and the private sector can certainly play a role, because I think that the private sector, well, I know that in Indonesia, the private sector is, corporations play a big role in influencing the government. So maybe, Irina, this is something, since you are a member of Kadin and of Iwafee, maybe you can do something after this webinar. It can also empower you even more to speak out to the government. And then I will also talk with Faisal Reza. Luckily, he's a friend, so I can latch on to him and try to get him to persuade his colleagues in the parliament and in other government institutions to be more gender aware. We are now past 5 o'clock, so half an hour past the designated time for the end of the webinar. So I think we should end it, and I would like to thank everyone for their participation, for all the speakers, of course, and the Swedish Embassy for organizing this event, and for the wonderful, really fruitful collaboration I had with the team from the Swedish Embassy. It was really a fruitful collaboration. Thank you, Natasha, Gustav, and I hope that this is an appetizer and a teaser for things to come in the future, because really we have only touched the surface, really only touched the surface, and it requires a lot more work, maybe a little bit more focused and more strategic. And I look forward to collaborating some more with all of you in this regard, because obviously it is my lifelong work. Gender equality is my lifelong work, and you know, I'm 66 now, and it's been my lifelong. So with that, I end this very stimulating webinar, and hope to see you in the future. Goodbye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Very
See
much.
you.
Have a good evening.
Thank you. Good evening.